What is a dangerous conversation? It's one that unsettles, it's often whispered, rarely spoken aloud. It's a conversation that has consequences. When's the last time you had a dangerous conversation, even with yourself? I'd like to talk to you about one of the first times I decided to have a dangerous conversation with my community, my friends, my family. In 2018, I directed a play called On Raftery's Hill by Marina Carr. The play explores the issues of sexual abuse and incest. Not territory many would want to walk into, let alone stage in front of a live audience. But Marina Carr did. And we decided it was an important conversation to have. I'll tell you a little bit about what happens in the play. Just before the interval, a father has an argument with his youngest daughter. She has disobeyed him. He's angry. He attacks her. When we directed the play, when we put it before an audience in Dublin, and up until 2 weeks ago, I had people come up to me and ask me, why did I put something like that on the stage? Why did I ask actors to reenact a rape before a live audience? Why did I put an audience in a position of sitting through a father rape his daughter? Here's the thing. That scene never happened in our production. That scene happened in the imagination of the audience. Now, to tell the truth, I took the audience to the edge of that moment, right up to just before it happened. The daughter is fighting with her father. She's sitting on a table. He's talking about how he skinned a rabbit. He's got a hunting knife in his hand. They argue. He grabs her. He sticks the knife into the table, and we cut to black. Everything else that happened, everything that I have been challenged about by people who were in that audience, happened in their imagination. And that's the real power of theatre. Its ability to allow you to go to places within your imagination that you could never go in real life. It allows you to have difficult conversations with each other, with artists, but more importantly, with yourself. We've been doing that as human beings for over 2,000 years. Think about plays like the Greek tragedies, like Oedipus Rex, a challenging text, a difficult story, a story about a man who unconsciously kills his father and marries his mother. Not something many of us have to deal with, I admit. But the play doesn't ask us to deal with the facts of the story. The play asks us to deal with fate, with control and lack of control, about the consequences of lack of self-awareness. It asks us many things. And when I put the play, put On Raftery's Hill on stage before an audience, I wasn't asking them to confront the act of abuse. I wasn't even asking them to consider the horror of the act of incest. Just before we hit the blackout, while the daughter and father were arguing, while she was screaming, I had every other member of the cast come onto the stage, understand what was about to happen, turn and leave. The conversation I wanted to have was, why does that happen? Why do we turn, leave, ignore? Why do we do that when we know what is about to happen, what might happen, what has already happened? After the interval, the audience come back into the play, most of them. They've had a drink, most of them needed it. They sit down and they wait to see what are going to be the consequences of the action. And this is the thing, nothing happens. The family go back to normal, the father goes back to normal, the daughter goes back to normal. And by the end of the play, by the last scene, what actually happens is they sit around the dinner table, laughing, communicating, and committing to stay together. That's the dangerous conversation I wanted to have with my community. In Ireland, over the last 30 years, we have managed to confront our institutions, or government, or church, about the kinds of brutality that has happened to our most vulnerable people, or women, or children. The question I wanted to ask was, what about the rest of us? Where were we? Where were the brothers, the sisters? Where were the uncles, the aunts, the mothers, the fathers, the neighbors, the teachers? Where were the people who noticed a bruise on an arm, a young person suddenly changing their behavior? What was that thing that we felt compelled to accommodate, to facilitate? Why did we want to make everybody comfortable? How many of you here have heard a joke and laughed, even though you didn't like it, didn't agree with it, felt it was inappropriate? In the second half of On Raftery's Hill, the father, the rapist, tells a joke. I knew that I could get the audience to understand what I was trying to say if I could get them to laugh at that joke. And they did, because we want to make everyone feel comfortable. We want to make it okay. They laughed, and that laugh mattered. Because in doing it, we open ourselves up and we notice. We notice that we've already forgotten the act that we witnessed, that we almost witnessed less than an hour before. And we do notice. And that's the power of theatre. That's why theatre is truly, truly dangerous, because of what it puts into your mind. We have been doing this for 2,000 years because even though we're sitting together in community, sharing the space with the performers and the writer on the stage, we, each of us, are bringing our own lived experience, our own set of values, our own assumptions and prejudices, our own knowledge into the space. And theatre is dangerous because there are two conversations happening at the same time. The conversation that's happening between the group, the community, and the performance on the stage. But the other conversation, the truly dangerous conversation, is the one that you're having with yourself. The one that's going on in here. The thing about theatre is that sometimes it can trick you into noticing what you think, what you feel. And really great theatre can help you challenge that, help you question yourself, help you notice. And that is why, in a world where we are constantly forced to take one side or another, when the storytelling devices in our pockets and on our screens are offering us binary options where you have to come down one side or another, where you're terrified of making one choice in case it's the wrong one or the other in case you get cancelled, where you're not allowed to think for yourself because by thinking for yourself, you're going to go against the flow. That's why we need theatre. We need it now more than ever. We need it because it's the only place where you sit, where you listen, where you think, where you hear two sides of an argument, two sides of a story, and where you're allowed the space, the privacy, and the time to have a conversation with yourself. And that can change you. that can change all of us. When I was at school, there was a man in my local town, and he was charged with taking photographs, inappropriate photographs of a young girl. He was charged, he was sentenced, and he went to prison. He didn't get a long sentence, and he came back home. There was a public meeting, a political meeting in the local hall, and the man walked in. There was a bit of tension at the beginning of the meeting until somebody in the crowd shouted out, "Here he is, the photographer of the century." And everyone laughed. When I heard that story, I wondered, was my father, my uncles, my friends in that meeting? Was the priest in the meeting, the guard? For months and months afterwards, every time I went into a shop, I wondered, were you in that meeting? Did you laugh? Did you think it was funny? Did you accommodate him and welcome him back into the town? But here's the important thing and the challenging thing. None of us, no matter what we do, are the worst act we've ever committed. And theatre creates space for that too. It allows us to have that dangerous thought and think about how we want to act upon it. I didn't have the words to challenge my friends, my family, my community, but Marina Carr did. And with her words, I could frame a conversation in our national theatre where I could put that play on the stage and start that dialogue and have that conversation. I believe theatre is incredibly important because the stories in your pocket, the access to information, the things that make you think you know what you do in the world, it's telling you. Very often we're conditioned to think in a certain way. Algorithms tell us what we like. They start to tell us what we believe. But sitting there, out there, in the dark, in safety and privacy, you can figure out what you actually think. I always think it's interesting that the first thing we do when we come into a theatre is we show you the emergency exit. We tell you how you can leave. We make sure you're safe. And then we bring down the lights. And then together we enter a space of imagination, of risk, of possibility. We do it together and we do it individually. For a long time, I've been really worried that the digital advances, the access to stories, would mean that theatre would become irrelevant, would be dismissed, that we would lose our audiences, that we would disappear. Every year in our theatre, we bring groups of young people in to show them, to hopefully encourage them to choose this as a pathway. And last year, we brought in a group of 15-year-olds, and I was feeling particularly frustrated at the time. And I said to them, look, theatre, we've had a good run, 2,500 years. Maybe it's done. Maybe it's over. Maybe it's time to move on. What do you think? Should we just call it a day? A young woman immediately shouted, absolutely not. Theatre will be with us forever. She was 15. She had her phone in her hand. And I asked her, why are you so sure? Why do you think theatre's going to exist when all the evidence is against us? Because, she said, theatre is the only place you can go to experience something without having to live through it. Thank you.